She followed her janitor through the rain, only to find him in a diner, helping his little girl with homework. That moment shattered every assumption she'd ever made about him. Claire adjusted the rearview mirror by a millimeter, the way she corrected a margin in a report, precise, controlled, invisible from the outside. The office had emptied an hour ago. The janitor with the quiet eyes and the satchel, Ethan Walker, had left by the service exit, moving like someone who hated to waste motion. She let two cars slide between them before pulling out. Suspicion wasn't her favorite tool, but it had kept a dozen bad decisions from reaching her boardroom. He didn't head toward the highway or the crowded blocks where a man could disappear. He took the slower streets, past the tire shop with its leaning sign, past the laundromat that never fixed its flickering E. His turn signals were punctual. His speed never twitched. A person trying to hide usually overperformed. He simply drove. When he parked beneath a sputtering street lamp, Claire cut her headlights and coasted to the curb. The diner's neon open hummed with the patience of places that collected the world's loose ends. Through the rain-freckled glass, she watched him push the door with his shoulder and the bell announce him like an old friend. He slipped into a booth near the window and laid the satchel beside him. Claire's pulse beat in her throat. The satchel. Her mind cataloged possibilities, equipment taken from the supply closet, a device, a ledger. She heard her mentor's voice from a decade ago. Trust is a contract. Verify the terms. Then the door opened again, and the terms changed. A girl in a blue hoodie darted inside, hair damp, cheeks bright from the night air. She went straight to him. No hesitation, no glance around to seek permission, and he rose already smiling. "Hey, Peanut," he said, and the words softened his face into something unguarded. She climbed into the booth, pressed into his side as if space were optional. Claire blinked. The satchel opened, not to expose company property, but a pencil case wrapped in elastic, a spiral notebook swollen with use, a paperback whose spine were the memory of hands. He slid a plate menu toward the girl. "Grilled cheese or pancakes?" he asked. "Pancakes," with the smiley face. She answered, conspiratorial, as if the cook were a magician and they shared a secret spell. He nodded, flagged the waitress without raising his voice, and ordered water for himself, milk for her. Claire's fingers loosened on the steering wheel. The rain found its rhythm again, threading down the glass in lines that blurred the fluorescent islands of the counter. Inside, he wiped a smear from the child's cheek with the corner of a napkin, then opened the notebook. "Spelling first," he said. She groaned into her sleeves, and then peeked up, defeated and amused. "Okay, but you do the hard ones." He laughed, a small, private sound. "That's not how spelling works." Claire leaned back. Doubt and relief collided in her chest, an impact without injury. The scene was ordinary, and that was what undid her most. Ordinary meant planned. It meant this wasn't a performance staged for sympathy or surveillance. It was a life carried in careful routines. He kept checking her forehead with the back of his hand between words, measuring heat the way people who have learned risk through love do it, quietly, without drama. The food arrived. He watched her eat as if it were a report he had to review line by line. When she pushed the plate back, he cut the last piece into a smaller triangle and said, "One more. Bravery slice." "Promise?" she asked. "Promise." Claire exhaled, not fully aware she'd been holding breath. The story she'd written about him, theft, disloyalty, angles, curled up and dissolved like steam on the diner's window. He reached into his pocket, counted bills twice, and left cash under the salt shaker. No flourish. No search for witnesses. The girl pressed her face to the glass, tracing a smiley with her fingertip. "It's cold," she said, and he rose, wrapping his coat around her shoulders. In the blur of neon and rain, they looked like two parts of one thought. When they stepped back into the night, Claire didn't move. She watched him buckle the girl into the back seat with a gentleness that made efficiency look like tenderness's older sibling. The satchel returned to the passenger side, now plainly what it was, a container for pencils, not secrets. She started the engine only when their taillights were small. The line between caution and cynicism had wandered on her, and she felt the faint embarrassment of a miscalculation. Still, she wasn't sorry she'd checked. Verification had simply given her a different truth than the one she'd chased. At the next red light, Claire touched her phone, then let it rest. Tomorrow, she would speak to him, carefully, professionally. Tonight, she allowed the image to settle. A man who saved his voice for what mattered, and a child who trusted it. The light turned green. She drove on, not away from the question, but toward it. The building woke in stages. Security lights dimmed, elevator doors sighed. Coffee machines clicked into a low hum. Claire timed her walk to intercept Ethan between the supply cage and the freight elevator, a neutral stretch of carpet where conversations could start and stop without witnesses. She carried a folder she didn't need, something to anchor her hands. He emerged with the rolling cart, sleeves pushed to his forearms, the satchel set neatly on top. He nodded, the courteous acknowledgement he gave everyone, and aimed for the elevator. "Mr. Walker," she said. He braked the cart with one foot. "Good morning, Ms. Montgomery." Claire heard the echo of last night. The diner bell, the small laugh over spelling, and felt her voice smooth. "Walk with me." She gestured toward the corridor. He glanced at the cart, set the brake properly, and matched her pace. "I wanted to clarify something," she began. "I've noticed you leave promptly at night. Policy allows it, of course. I wondered, is there a timing constraint I should be aware of?" His expression didn't close, it steadied. "There is, yes. My daughter meets me at Murphy's Diner after my shift. The owner lets us use a corner booth. We do homework there before we head home." "Murphy's," she repeated, as if confirming a line item. "Every night." "Most," he said. "It's warm, it's close, and they don't mind if the milk refills stretch a little." They turned a corner where the windows cast rectangles of pale light. "Childcare can be complicated," Claire said, testing the ground. "Expensive," he answered gently. "And complicated. Emma's school program ends before my shift. The diner fills the gap. Mrs. Murphy says a regular table is cheaper than a sitter. She's right." Claire let herself picture the pencil case again. "Does Emma like it there?" "She likes the smiley face pancakes," he said, the ghost of a smile touching his mouth. "And the way the waitress draws stars on her spelling list when she finishes. Routine helps." They passed a conference room where someone had left a pie chart up on the screen, slices frozen mid-argument. Claire slowed. "You always carry that satchel," she said, glancing at it. "Homework. And a paperback," he replied. "She reads me paragraphs while I clean up spills with napkins. We race to see who finishes first." He said it without performance. The facts arranged themselves. Claire stopped at the end of the hall. "I appreciate your clarity," she said. "If anyone questions your departure time, they can come to me. Our policy is designed to support the people who keep this place running." He hesitated, then inclined his head. "Thank you. I try not to take advantage." "I didn't say advantage," she corrected softly. "I said support." The elevator chimed. He moved to step away, and a thought surfaced, uncomfortable only because it was personal. "One more thing," Claire said. "Does Emma feel well? Last night, you checked her forehead a few times." His eyes flicked up, surprised that she'd noticed, then settled. "She runs warm when she's tired. I'm watching it." "Good," Claire said. The word came out more like a wish than a verdict. "If you need to adjust a shift, send the request directly to my office. No explanations required." He weighed that, the way people do when help carries hidden costs. "I'll manage," he said. "But I'm grateful." The elevator opened, the cart rolled in. He held the door with his forearm. "Ms. Montgomery," he added, "I aim to leave floors better than I find them. That includes conversations." Claire met his gaze. "So do I." The door slid shut. Alone in the corridor, she realized the suspicion that had sent her out into the rain had been replaced by something quieter and more demanding. A responsibility to make the ground under this man and his daughter steadier. Not because it looked generous, but because it was correct. She closed the unused folder and headed for her first meeting, already thinking about how policies turned into places where a child could finish a spelling list with stars. By the time Claire left the office that night, the streets had traded noise for fog. The air held the clean chill that only industrial districts seemed to own. Metal, asphalt, and the faint aftertaste of rain. She wasn't following Ethan anymore. She told herself that. She was just driving the same route home, which happened to pass the narrow lane behind his garage apartment. She noticed him before she decided to stop. The streetlight above the bench blinked every few seconds, washing the scene in pulses of amber and dark. Ethan sat there, coat draped over something small that shifted against his chest. It took her a moment to see the outline of the child's face. Claire pulled to the curb and stepped out. her heels clicking like misplaced punctuation in the quiet. "Mr. Walker?" He looked up, not startled, only tired. Emma's head rested on his shoulder, eyes half open, breath uneven. "Evening, Ms. Montgomery," he said, voice low to keep from waking her. "She doesn't look well," Claire said, taking a step closer. In the flickering light, the girl's face looked too pale. "She started running a fever after dinner," he admitted. "We were heading home, but the car stalled again. I didn't want to walk her in the cold. Have you called anyone?" He shook his head. "Can't afford another tow tonight. I just need her temperature to drop a little." He pressed his palm to Emma's forehead again, the motion automatic and helpless all at once. Claire's voice softened, cutting through the hesitation. "She needs a doctor." "I'll take her first thing in the morning," he said. First thing in the morning could be too late. She heard the edge in her own tone, authority repurposed as concern. He looked at her as though measuring whether the argument was about hierarchy or help. "Hospitals cost money," he said finally. "I'm not asking," she replied. "I'm driving." He hesitated only a second longer before lifting Emma carefully into his arms. The girl whimpered, one small hand clutching at his collar. Claire opened the back door of her car and turned on the heater. Inside, the silence felt fragile. The tires whispered over wet pavement while Ethan murmured to his daughter, half words, half comfort. Claire focused on the road, watching the reflections of traffic lights slide across the windshield. "She's been warm since this afternoon," he said quietly. "I thought maybe just tired from school." "What grade?" Claire asked, more to keep him speaking than to collect facts. "Second," he said. "She likes math. Says numbers don't lie, even when people do." Claire glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "That's a wise thing for a 7-year-old to know." "She learned early," he said simply. They reached the emergency entrance. Claire parked, and before she could offer, Ethan was already out, the child still in his arms. He moved with a strange calm, the kind that hides panic behind precision. She followed as he checked in, gave his information, and settled into a hard plastic chair while nurses led Emma away for tests. When he sat, shoulders hunched, she took the seat beside him. The air smelled of antiseptic and coffee. "You didn't have to come," he said quietly. "Maybe not," Claire answered. "But I couldn't drive away either." He nodded, eyes fixed on the swinging doors. "That makes two of us." For a long while they said nothing. The hum of the vending machine filled the silence. Claire watched his hands, strong, calloused, motionless on his knees. Every few minutes, they'd twitch toward the corridor, as if his body couldn't decide whether to stay or run. When a nurse finally appeared, he was on his feet before she spoke. Claire rose too, without realizing it. "She's stable," the nurse said. "Mild infection. We're giving her fluids." Ethan exhaled, his shoulders dropping an inch. Claire placed her folder, still somehow in her hand, on the chair. "Good," she said quietly. "That's good." He turned to her then, eyes weary but steady. "Thank you. For not questioning. For just doing." Claire shook her head. "You don't thank people for what decency demands." He gave a tired smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Most people still need reminding." Claire looked past him, through the glass where the faint outline of a small figure moved beneath a blanket. "Maybe," she said, "but not all." The hum of the fluorescent lights filled the space between them, and for the first time since she'd met him, Claire didn't feel the need to control the silence. It already said enough. The waiting room at St. Luke's looked like every waiting room Claire had ever seen. Too bright, too still, too full of people pretending not to count the minutes. The chairs were arranged in tight lines, the color of overwashed denim. Ethan sat in one of them, hands clasped loosely, elbows balanced on his knees, gaze fixed on the floor tile pattern as if it held instructions for surviving uncertainty. Claire had offered to leave once the nurse confirmed Emma was stable, but Ethan hadn't answered, and somehow she'd stayed. She sat across from him, posture still perfect, fingers folded over her phone that hadn't buzzed in half an hour. For once, no one expected anything from her. Not numbers, not signatures, not decisions that carried 6 zeros. Just presence. She studied him quietly. The harsh hospital lights made his exhaustion transparent. The dark crescents under his eyes, the days-old stubble, the way his shirt hung slightly loose as if it had forgotten its owner's shape. He wasn't fidgeting or sighing, just waiting with a patience that came from repetition. This wasn't his first night under fluorescent mercy. When the nurse returned with a clipboard, Ethan rose immediately. Claire watched him sign where told, each stroke careful and deliberate. Insurance? The nurse asked, without looking up. Self-pay, he said. The nurse nodded, impersonal. Claire felt something tighten in her chest. Put it on my account, she said before she could reconsider. Both turned to her. Ethan shook his head. That's not necessary. Neither is pride when your child's in a hospital bed. Claire replied evenly. Consider it company policy. The nurse hesitated, sensing the kind of authority that doesn't need proof, then scribbled a note. When she left, Ethan exhaled through his nose. You don't have to do that. I already did. He studied her for a moment. You're used to making things happen, aren't you? It's the only language the world listens to, she said. He nodded, almost to himself. My world's smaller, but it listens when I whisper. That line stayed with her long after silence returned. Through the glass wall, she could see Emma sleeping in a narrow bed, Fräulein taped to her small hand. The soft rise and fall of her chest was rhythmic, reassuring, devastating in its fragility. She looks like her mother, Claire said, before realizing the risk of the question. He didn't flinch. She used to. Not much anymore. Sorry, Claire murmured. Don't be, he said. Some stories end quietly. That's better than loud ones. The hum of the air conditioning covered the pause that followed. Claire shifted slightly, elbows resting on her knees now, mirroring him without meaning to. You're very calm, she said. Calm is cheaper than panic, he replied, tone dry but kind. And she needs one steady thing in the room. That's my job. It was the way he said job that caught her. The same way she used the word for quarterly reports or board meetings. Purpose, not obligation. She nodded slowly. You do it well. Practice, he said. Hours passed in increments measured by the nurse's footsteps and the steady tick of the wall clock. Claire found herself wondering when she'd last sat still without checking an agenda. Every so often, Ethan rose to the window, watched his daughter breathe, then returned to the chair with that same deliberate patience. At 3 a.m., the doctor appeared with a smile and an update. No complications, mild infection, rest and fluids would do the rest. Ethan thanked him, voice barely audible, and for a brief moment his shoulders eased. The kind of relief that hurts before it heals. Claire stood. I'll drive you home, she said. You've done enough. Not yet. They walked down the corridor together, their footsteps softened by the polished linoleum. Outside, the air was cold and wet again, but this time Claire didn't mind. He carried Emma carefully to the car, her head against his chest, and Claire saw something she hadn't expected. Devotion stripped of performance, the kind that doesn't ask to be witnessed. When they reached the car, he whispered, "Thank you." She met his eyes over the roof of the vehicle. For what? For believing the truth when it didn't ask to be proved. Claire didn't answer. Some truths, she thought, were their own witnesses. She started the car, the hospital fading behind them, its lights still burning for whoever else was learning patience tonight. The morning light leaked through the blinds of the small hospital room, turning everything the color of weak tea. The beeping of monitors had become background music, steady and oddly comforting. Ethan sat in a plastic chair by the bed, Emma's small hand resting inside his much larger one. Her fever had broken during the night. She slept now, damp curls pressed to her forehead, breathing evenly. Claire stood near the window, blazer folded neatly over a chair. She had called her assistant at dawn, issued instructions with quiet efficiency. Cancel meetings, postpone briefings, reschedule the investor call. When the assistant had asked why, Claire simply said, family emergency, and surprised herself by not correcting it. Ethan looked up when she moved closer. You don't have to stay, he said gently. I know, she replied, but I don't want to leave until she's properly discharged. He smiled faintly. You're not used to being told what to do, are you? Not anymore, she said. It took years to earn that. Ethan nodded toward Emma. I used to think earning meant more hours, more effort. Then I learned it can mean choosing what matters most. Claire leaned against the windowsill. You talk like someone who's already paid the price for that lesson. He looked down at his daughter. I did, but it wasn't a bill I regret. She waited, sensing the story he was willing to tell only once. I studied mechanical engineering, he said. Had a job lined up out of state, good one too. Then my wife decided the world had more to offer than diapers and midnight fevers. She left a note in an empty crib. He paused, thumb tracing the back of Emma's hand. I walked into the nursery and realized the choice was simple. Not easy, just simple. You stayed, Claire said softly. I chose her, he corrected. People said I threw my career away. Maybe I did. But every night she reaches for my hand, and I know exactly what I built instead. Claire's throat tightened. She'd spent her entire adult life constructing empires of efficiency, people moving at her command, problems solved by policy. Yet here was a man who had built something invisible and infinitely harder to maintain: trust. She'll remember that, Claire said quietly. She already does, Ethan replied. You can see it when she falls asleep. There's a look kids get when they know the world won't fall apart overnight. Claire nodded slowly, feeling the truth of it in her chest. You make it sound easy. He smiled without humor. It's not. It's work. Real work. But it pays in peace, not paychecks. They sat in silence for a while. The nurse entered, checked the chart, smiled, and left again. Emma stirred slightly, whispering something incoherent, then sighed and drifted back into sleep. Claire looked at the father and daughter, two people holding on to each other in a world that seemed engineered to pull families apart. You're not what I expected, she said. He raised an eyebrow. What did you expect? Someone careless. Someone with excuses. That's why I followed you. Ethan's expression didn't change, but his voice was measured. And what did you find instead? Claire took a breath. Discipline. Love. Maybe a better version of integrity than the one I preach in boardrooms. The corners of his mouth lifted. That's a rare word these days. So is humility, she said. He chuckled quietly. Then I guess we both have something to learn. Outside, the morning traffic began to stir, distant horns blending with the low hum of the hospital's HVAC system. Claire realized she didn't want to return to her office just yet. Not because she was tired, but because she wasn't done understanding this man who lived by a kind of logic success rarely honored. Ethan looked at her again, his voice softer now. You ever choose something that made no sense to anyone but you? Yes, she admitted. My company. It was supposed to fill the space where everything else should have been. And did it? She hesitated. Until last night, I thought it did. He nodded once, as if that made perfect sense. Then maybe you're not as far from home as you think. Claire looked at Emma, her small hand still folded in his, and wondered, for the first time in years, what it might feel like to choose something for no reason other than love. The discharge papers rustled like thin leaves in Ethan's hands as they stepped out into the afternoon light. The rain had rinsed the world clean, leaving the hospital parking lot shining and streaked with puddles. Emma, still drowsy from medicine, leaned against his shoulder, her small arms looped around his neck. Claire followed a step behind, her heels clicking softly against the pavement. Ethan opened the car door carefully, settling his daughter into the back seat with a tenderness that seemed instinctive, practiced. When he closed the door, Claire caught his reflection in the glass, his face drawn but calm, the kind of calm that didn't come from ignorance, but endurance. I owe you an apology, she said finally. He turned, squinting slightly against the light. For what? For following you that first night. For assuming the worst when all you were doing was. She paused, the word almost foreign to her. Being good. Ethan's mouth curved, not in amusement, but understanding. You thought I was stealing? I thought you were hiding something, she admitted. Turns out I was right. It just wasn't what I expected. He leaned against the car, crossing his arms. You wouldn't be the first person who looked at my job title and filled in the blanks. Claire folded her own arms, mirroring him. Maybe, but I'm supposed to be better than that. Supposed to be, he echoed. We all are. Doesn't always happen. A gust of wind lifted her hair across her face, and she brushed it aside impatiently. You could have reported me. Filed a complaint. I followed an employee off company grounds. It was reckless. Ethan tilted his head, studying her. Wouldn't have changed anything. I saw what I needed to see too. What was that? That you cared enough to show up. His tone was simple, not flattering, just factual. You could have looked the other way. Most people in your position do. Claire hesitated. Caring isn't something I've been accused of lately. He smiled faintly. Then maybe you just needed better evidence. They both fell quiet, the only sound the muted hum of distant traffic and the rhythmic tapping of rainwater dripping from a sign overhead. Claire looked at him, then at the car, where Emma's reflection shimmered against the window, sleepy, safe, whole. I'll be honest, Claire said. I don't usually make mistakes like this. I don't misread people. Ethan shrugged. You didn't misread me. You just hadn't read far enough. Something about that line made her laugh, softly but sincerely. You have a way with words, Mr. Walker. Occupational hazard, he said. Janitors hear everything. We just learn when not to repeat it. Claire stepped closer, close enough to smell the faint scent of soap and engine grease clinging to his sleeves. You're not what I expected in any sense. He met her eyes steadily. And you're not what I feared. She frowned slightly. Feared? He nodded. Bosses like you usually don't see people like me. Not really. We keep the floors clean, and you walk fast enough not to notice they were ever dirty. Claire felt the truth of that settle somewhere deep. Maybe I'm noticing now. Then maybe that's enough, he said. She looked past him to the sky, where thin clouds drifted apart to reveal a slice of pale blue. Do you believe in second chances, Ethan? I believe in earned ones, he said. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. An understanding that wasn't romantic or dramatic, but rooted in mutual recognition. Two people who had been carrying too much alone, realizing they didn't have to, at least not today. Claire drew a slow breath. You should take the week off. With pay. Tell HR it's approved. He smiled wryly. I'll tell them you forced me. I did, she said, with a small grin. Ethan opened the driver's door, but paused before getting in. You know, Ms. Montgomery, I used to think people at the top didn't bleed. Just traded pressure for polish. Claire gave a quiet laugh. We bleed. We just hide it under better suits. He nodded, closing the door gently. Then maybe stop hiding so well. As the car pulled away, Claire watched until the taillights merged into the flow of traffic. She stood there for a long moment, the discharge papers still in her hand, damp from the mist. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a CEO standing outside a hospital. She felt like a woman who'd just learned the difference between power and purpose. And in the silence that followed, she realized which one she wanted more. The following week, the office hummed with the same mechanical precision it always had. Keyboards clacking, phones ringing, printers sighing, but something under the surface had shifted. People lowered their voices when Claire walked past. Not out of fear, but curiosity. Stories had begun to circulate. The CEO seen leaving a hospital at dawn, carrying coffee for the janitor, her car parked outside the employee lot long after midnight. No one dared ask her directly, but the whispers clung to the hallways like humidity. Claire pretended not to notice. Her stride was as crisp as ever, her voice in meetings as composed. Yet when she returned to her office and closed the glass door, she found herself staring at the photograph on her desk. An old corporate gala where she stood beside men in tuxedos, smiling the way people do when they know cameras, not truth, are watching. The smile looked brittle now. She turned the frame face down. At noon, her assistant buzzed. Mr. Walker is here to see you. Send him in, she said, before her reason could catch up. Ethan entered wearing his work uniform, sleeves rolled, the faint scent of disinfectant following him. He looked better, rested, almost. I wanted to thank you, he said, for last week, and for the time off. Emma's back at school. She drew you something. He held out a folded sheet of construction paper. A crayon drawing of 3 stick figures, one tall in a blue dress, one medium in brown, and one small with yellow curls. Beneath it, in a child's unsteady hand, thank you for helping Daddy. Claire stared at it longer than necessary. Tell her I'll frame it, she said. Ethan smiled. She'll like that. He turned to leave, but Claire spoke again. Ethan, wait. He paused, patient as always. I've been thinking, she began. We're starting a maintenance training initiative next quarter, cross-skilling for staff who want advancement. It includes certifications, salary bumps, full benefits. I'd like to recommend you as the pilot candidate. He blinked, surprised. I appreciate that, but I'm not sure I'm qualified. You are, she said simply. You've run this building longer than half the executives have run their teams. He hesitated. That's generous, Ms. Montgomery. It's fair, she corrected. For a moment, they stood in silence. Through the glass, sunlight flickered across the corridor, catching the dust motes in slow spirals. Claire realized how strange it felt to be nervous about a conversation that wasn't about profits or deadlines. Finally, he nodded. All right, I'll do it, but only if you promise one thing. She raised an eyebrow. And what's that? That you'll actually take a lunch break one of these days. People talk, you know. Claire laughed, an unguarded, genuine sound that startled even her. Deal. After he left, she lingered by the window, watching him push the cart down the hall. He greeted every person he passed, not with practiced politeness, but with real acknowledgement. It struck her that leadership wasn't about being seen, it was about seeing. That evening, she drove through the neighborhood where he lived. The diner's neon sign glowed against the twilight, and through the window, she caught sight of Emma coloring at a booth. For once, Claire didn't hide or hesitate. She parked and went inside. The bell above the door chimed softly. Emma looked up first, then grinned. "Ms. Montgomery," she called, waving. Ethan turned, startled but not displeased. "You found our headquarters," he said. "Couldn't let you have all the good meetings," she replied. He slid a menu across the table. "How special is still smiley face pancakes?" Claire sat, smiling faintly. "Then I'll have those. Seems to work for your team." Emma giggled, swinging her legs under the seat. The waitress arrived with a coffee pot, recognizing Claire but saying nothing, just a knowing smile before she poured. For the first time in years, Claire felt the noise in her head quiet. The diner wasn't elegant or private, but it was honest, and that honesty felt like something she could finally rest in. As Emma chattered about school, Claire listened, not out of politeness, but out of need. When Ethan looked across the table, she met his gaze steadily. There was no hierarchy left between them, no polished distance. Only two people sharing coffee and the faint, warm hum of belonging. Outside, the neon light flickered again, and for the first time in a long time, Claire hoped it never turned off. The following Saturday unfolded beneath a sky so clear it looked almost new. Maplewood Park stretched wide and green, the kind of place where laughter carried easily and time seemed less demanding. Claire arrived a few minutes early, the wind tugging lightly at the edge of her scarf. She spotted Ethan near the pond, pushing Emma on the swing. The little girl's hair glinted like sunlight trapped in motion, her giggles blending with the creak of the chains. Claire hesitated for a moment at the edge of the playground, watching them. There was something disarmingly pure about the scene. No hierarchy, no audience, just a father and daughter existing in quiet rhythm. When Emma saw her, she waved both hands so hard she nearly lost balance. "Ms. Montgomery," she shouted. "You came." "I said I would," Claire replied, crossing the grass. "And you promised pancakes next time, remember?" Ethan smiled, steadying the swing. "She's been asking every day if you'd really come." "Now I have no excuse," Claire said, crouching beside Emma as the swing slowed. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "Better," Emma said proudly. "Daddy says my fever left because it got bored." "That sounds like something your dad would say," Claire replied with a grin. Ethan chuckled. "I told her it packed up and moved to Florida." Emma laughed, then leaned closer. "Ms. Montgomery, Daddy said you work in a castle." Claire glanced at Ethan, amused. "A castle?" He shrugged. "Tall building, lots of windows. Same difference." "Well," Claire said thoughtfully, "even castles need doors that stay open. Would you like to visit one day?" Emma's eyes widened. "Really? Really?" Claire confirmed. "But only if your dad approves." Ethan's smile softened. "If it's a castle with pancakes, I'll consider it." They moved toward a nearby bench. Claire sat, watching Emma chase a squirrel near the trees. The sound of children's laughter floated through the air, light and uncalculated. "You didn't have to come today," Ethan said quietly. "I wanted to," she replied. "You and your daughter remind me of something I forgot existed." "And what's that?" "Peace," Claire said simply. "The kind that doesn't depend on reports or deadlines." Ethan nodded, gaze following Emma. "It's hard to keep, even when you find it." "I know," Claire said. "That's why I'm trying to learn." For a moment, neither spoke. The wind moved softly through the branches, scattering the faint scent of lilac and cut grass. Then Emma returned, a handful of wildflowers clenched in her fist. She held them out to Claire. "For you," she said. "Because you make Daddy smile different." Claire's throat tightened. "Thank you, Emma. That might be the best reason anyone's ever given me flowers." Emma climbed up onto the bench beside her, legs swinging. "Are you going to come again?" Claire looked at Ethan before answering. "Would you like me to?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Only if you promise to stay this time. Grown-ups say see you soon, and then forget." Claire bent slightly, meeting her eyes. "Then I promise. No forgetting." Ethan watched the exchange with quiet warmth. The words hung between them, not as obligation but as a beginning. "Maplewood's a good place for promises," he said after a moment. Something about all the open space. It doesn't let you lie. Claire smiled faintly. Then I'll make sure I only tell the truth here. Emma grinned, satisfied, and darted off toward the slide. Claire leaned back, her eyes following the child's bright path across the playground. She's remarkable, she murmured. She's everything, Ethan said simply. Claire turned to him. I believe you. The sun dipped lower, painting the pond with gold and silver light. Families began to pack up, but Claire remained seated beside Ethan, neither of them feeling the urge to leave. For once, her mind wasn't calculating what came next. When Emma ran back to them, breathless and laughing, she wrapped her small arms around both of their shoulders. This is my favorite day, she declared. Claire smiled, her voice low but certain. Mine too. And as the wind stirred the trees above them, Claire realized something she hadn't in years. The most important moments don't happen in offices or boardrooms. They happen quietly, under sunlight, when no one is taking notes. She reached for Emma's hand, then Ethan's, and for the first time, she didn't feel like she was borrowing someone else's life. She felt, finally, like she'd found where she belonged.